I begin to feel very anal. Mind you, these paintings are all very anal anyway. I was thinking about that on the way here, because it's all very neat and contained and precise. It's almost as bad as Paul Harvey. But he's even worse. He must be very, very anal. I'm not sure what that means actually, very, very anal. I'm not sure what anal means. But I do like things to be a bit neat and organised. And I know that I've talked to you before about this and it's probably on record somewhere, but I'll just sum it up to say that when I was at art college in my final year, I had this breakthrough. And I suppose it was looking at Van Gogh and German Expressionism, particularly Kirchner, for example, where I could do an outline, not that neat, and brush in colours. Again, not mega neat, you know, but reasonably, but not mega neat. And then over time, because I did give up painting for 14 years, and when I returned to it, I was mega neat. You know, like if you look at this one, and hopefully in this video we're actually going to focus on the paintings for a sustained period of time, because they're the things. My voice is just the same. You don't need to see my face. It's not going to give you any much more. I was moving away from it already. My face is not going to give you much more information than my voice will give you. Okay, it's fun to see hands moving around and this guy being expressive, but if you're not looking at the painting for a long time, you'll miss the plot. And this is obviously very neat. The lines are, you know, they've got sharp edges. Even though if you go close up, they're slightly wobbly, fine, but they've got sharp edges. In fact, if you look at this one, it's not even wobbly really, very minimally. You'd have to go really close. If you stand where I'm standing, just from a couple of feet away, it looks like an immaculate line. It's not an immaculate, perfect computer printout line because it is hand done. And furthermore, it's stupidly done with oil paint. I say stupidly, which is not really what I want to say. That line is really fine. Because oil paint doesn't dry very quickly. So having painted this bit in the colour, I then have to paint this bit and that bit, and my hand is desperately trying to avoid sticking in this bit which is still wet. So I was making life hard for myself. And also by painting it all by hand anyway. Now if you look at Professor Craig Martin's work, for example, who does a similar sort of look with black lines and flat colours, he uses acrylic, so one part has dried before you put your hand in it and you can paint the next part, and it simplifies matters hugely. Well, I've done the complete reverse because oil paint's suited for expressive painting, acrylic paint is suited for this flat type of colour, and I've done the opposite way round. So my earlier work, which is what this exhibition is oil paint doing flat colour, which is much harder, and my recent work, which is expressive, which is oil paint is suited for, is using acrylic colour. This does strike me as being a little bit perverse, but there are other factors, other reasons. In essence, I couldn't continue using oil paint anyway because someone was staying in my house that's probably got an allergy to oil paint and it stinks the place out and it takes a month or 2 months to dry, so I was forced to use acrylic anyway, so that explains that. I'm just trying to find if there's something which has a little bit more expression in it, but there isn't. But I will say that I was trying to do something different to these paintings. As I say, I started off with German Expressionism, which is kind of very fluid. I found my drawings, which I was just using a black wax crayon for, I could do very quickly and very easily and modify the line, and I enjoyed doing it. I started off the painting like that, but as I worked on it, it just got tighter and tighter. And I couldn't seem to get away from that. I was trying for about, how long was I trying for? Probably about 13 years to do something that I felt captured the spirit of the drawing much more, the freedom. I tried different times and failed miserably until I think it was 2013. And I thought, this is just do or die, sink or swim, and lots of other cliches, that I'm going to have a breakthrough now, or I'm just going to give up. I'm fed up doing black lines with flat colours. And over a 2-month period, I tried breaking out of that mode of doing things with various false paths. I thought, oh no, this is the way, and then no, it's not. And I carried on, and I thought, this is the way. And I destroyed about 13 paintings, which I very rarely do. I've not really done that before, and I've not really done it since, but during this period, because I was just trying anything that came up to hope I would find a direction through it for the future. Until eventually I did. And I suppose I've been exploring that ever since, and in essence it's a much more expressive way of painting. When I was doing these paintings, I might have to mix up a lot of different colours to get this kind of turquoisey, the exact shade, because if it's too bright it will leap out, if it's too dull it will sink back. I wanted it to hold its place, I wanted it to be an interesting colour in combination with other colours, and sometimes just to do a small area like that, I could even sit there mixing up paint for an hour to get the right shade. I go through all these different variations of the green. I'm not saying this particular green, it took me an hour, it could have taken me 5 minutes, I don't know. But sometimes I had to do that, I couldn't get it right. But what I was seeing in the mixing process was lots and lots of interesting colours that were lost. And now I can put all those different colours on the canvas. So, as I said, all those colours which were lost, I can now put on the canvas and enjoy them, which I do. It's a bit more chaotic, so there's much more of a tension and a kind of interaction between control and chaos, whereas these are, I would say, all controlled. They're fine for what they are, but I moved on from them. There is some material online about more recent work. I did an interview at the Cherno Labut gallery in Prague, where I had a solo show, and they filmed me, and I'm talking about the new works in that video. But I was trying to do something of my own in these paintings. Now, let me explain that. When people look at these, they immediately say it's like Lichtenstein. Well, okay, he used black lines and he used flat colour, although he did use a lot of dots in his, which I haven't. But you might just as well say, well, Rembrandt was just like Leonardo, because they both used shade, light and dark, and Leonardo did it first, so what's the point of Rembrandt doing it? He's just, I'm not saying I'm Rembrandt or Leonardo, I'm just saying this is an analogy of how people see something that's a bit like something else, and they think it's the same as something else. Oh, there's people coming, there's a frame.
Double-sided tape.
It's alright, don't worry. It's like you're the person from Porlock. So as I was saying, people see something and it's a bit like something else and they kind of think it's the same. So you can't tell stalk from butter was the old advert, that margarine, was just the same as butter even though it's not butter. You probably could tell it, I don't know, but see this, they say, oh, it's like Lichtenstein. Well, you could equally well say it's like Michael Craig Martin. There's another, you could say it's like Patrick Colefield. Or you could say all of them are like cartoons, or you could say they're all like Van Gogh or German Expressionism, because previously people used black lines and flat or flattish colour in work. There was a style, I think it was called cloisonné in the 19th century with Van Gogh and people of his ilk, and it was derived or named after jewellery where the enamel was set in a black outline. Well, I don't actually like Liechtenstein that much because it's like a cartoon and it's fairly superficial and it's all kind of ironic and, you know, clever stuff. I wanted to do something more personal. Also, Paul Harvey, who uses black outlines and flat colour, did his version. He thought he'd done a Charles Thomson painting and he showed it to me, and what he'd done, all the lines were even and he just made them wobble. And I said, Paul, that's absolute crap. That's nothing like my work at all. That's not what I do. And he then looked at my work and realised he'd completely misunderstood it, because he's such an idiot, that man. I really got up his nose. No, I don't mean it at all. Paul is a very clever, sensitive and helpful and supportive individual in the Stuckist entourage. But we do rib each other a bit. So there we are, joke. Now, if you look at mine, you'll see that I definitely do not have even lines. Let's take this one. Obviously, the line there is much thinner than the line there. And generally speaking, that is the case. So that's one difference, and the reason I do that is because I wanted it to be more organic, more fluid, and even in a tiny way more expressive. The other big difference, I suppose, from the three artists I've just named, Michael Craig Martin and
Liechtenstein,
and the other guy, Patrick Caulfield, is that I have perspective distortion in mine, as you can see here, particularly with the that's an ashtray, and a revolving ashtray. You push the top handle down, the round bit spins round and deposits the tobacco or the fag end into the bin underneath. Fag in English, for anybody who's watching from America, means cigarette. Fag in America means homosexual, and it's a derogatory term, but you definitely do not deposit homosexuals in that little device there. That's not how it works. So this is a particularly good example of what I'm talking about with distortion, and I suppose there is a certain amount of that derives again from Van Gogh and German Expressionism ultimately, although you wouldn't really think so just looking at it. But I really enjoyed the way things are not in a Renaissance perspective. The viewer may or may not enjoy them, that's up to them, you know, because if they don't, then they can look at something else, but that's what I enjoy doing. And that's a really good example. That's another example of crazy perspective. And I did, I think, about 6 like that, pushing it further into distortion with each one. Why did I do that? I don't know, some kind of quirk, I guess, to see how much you can warp something and yet still you know what it is. So I suppose that's a bit dealing with the language of art. It's beginning to sound suspiciously conceptual. But then Richard Cork, the Times art critic, as he was then, when I talked to him about 1999, 2000, did say I was conceptual in my work, because I'd carried a bit of it round the corner. It was actually, not this painting, it was actually a version of Seurat's Bathers, and what happened was the foot on the bathers, I hadn't enough canvas, so I just continued it round the corner onto the side of the canvas, and he spotted that, leapt on it, and accused me of conceptualism, or said something like, "We're a bit of a conceptualist on the quiet," which, you know, I guess I am in a small way. But then you see, the thing about Stuckism, it's nominally opposed to conceptual art. It's not opposed to all aspects of conceptualism or conceptual art, because what it does posit is that we should have an integrated holistic art, so things should be balanced, and to just go one way completely is a lopsided form of art. It's not a healthy kind of art, it's not a satisfying kind of art. So that little element on my painting of conceptualism is fine, because, you know, it's in proportion to the rest of the painting. Again, here I was trying to push it. I was seeing how far I could push depicting something so you'd know what it was, but I wasn't depicting it in a conventional way. Now, I would just like to point out that one of my best known painting actually is one of Sir Nicholas Sirota when he was director of the Tate Gallery, standing in front of a large pair of red knickers on a washing line and saying, "Is it a genuine Emin, £10,000, or a worthless fake, this pair of knickers?" And apart from the fact that Sarah Kent, who was then the art editor of Time Out, I'm going to continue this in a minute. For those of you who wondered why I was continuing in a minute, that's because there was a slight break for technical reasons. So we'll come back to Sarah Kent, art editor of Time Out. Came along to a show at what was then my Stuckism International Gallery, and I had this painting there of Sir Nicholas Sirota that people think is a self-portrait. It's not, you know, we're not twins at birth or anything like that. He's older than me and doesn't look anything like me, but people seem to think he does. So she reviewed the show, and first of all she said this was it schoolboy humour or something of that kind. So it's rather satisfying for me, a few weeks later, to see a television programme where Tracy Emin was complaining that in one of her installations there were two pairs of knickers which weren't the genuine ones. They'd been substituted somewhere along the line. So my painting was rather prophetic, rather than pathetic, as she seemed to think it was. Now, the next thing to say about her review was that she said I'd obviously been looking at Professor Michael Craig Martin, because he does black outlines and flat colours. Well, it seemed to me to be a very limited understanding of art history, because there were people before him that were doing it, like Lichtenstein, or going back to the 19th century and the German Expressionists and Van Gogh and so on. German Expressionists of the 20th century, by the way, just in case someone thinks I don't know what I'm talking about. The other thing about Professor Michael Craig Martin, he uses these lurid colours. Well, I did a bit of an analysis, and I'd actually used them when I was at college in 1979, before he was using them. And even worse, from his point of view, is that he had done a series of versions of Seurat's The Bathers with black outlines and his colours on them. And this was featured in, the Sunday Times colour supplement. Some years before, when Stuckism was launched in 1999, we had been featured in the Sunday Times colour supplement, and they had a big version of a big picture of my version of Seurat's The Bathers. So I would say, as I'd done my version before he did his version, surely it wasn't a question of me looking at him, but him looking at me. So I think Sarah Kent got it completely the wrong way around. And if she'd just spoken to me, she could have saved herself all the embarrassment of her words being completely devalued, sabotaged, and shown how false they were about 20 years later. And this is going to be here forevermore. This will be her epitaph. They will have on her gravestone, Sarah Kent said, and then they will have the truth. It doesn't give me any joy at all, believe me, to say this. I'm smiling out of compassion.